When my mother's blood smeared across the kitchen floor, my grandfather stood in the doorway and smiled. "It's only you and me now," he whispered, his voice colder than the river in January. Even now, more than 60 years later, that moment still claws at me. It was the day my childhood died, and the nightmare began. For decades I locked the memory away, but silence only grows heavier with time. Today, I tell it not to relive the terror, but to break the chain of shadows. If you are listening anywhere in the world, leave a comment, subscribe, and share, because some stories must be told, even if they disturb the peace you thought you had. I was born in a small clapboard house along the Ohio River in Marietta, Ohio. Our home was nothing grand. Its wooden boards groaned under our footsteps. The windows rattled when the wind whipped off the water, and the porch sagged just enough to squeak when you leaned against its rail. Yet it was home. From the porch, you could see the shimmer of the river, fishermen casting their lines, and children racing along the muddy banks. In the evenings, cardinals painted the trees with flashes of scarlet, and the scent of wood smoke, mixed with fresh-caught fish, floated across the air. My mother, Elena Vargas, was the backbone of our little household. Known as a healer, she had inherited the knowledge of herbs and roots from her grandmother in Puerto Rico. People came from miles away to seek her help, women with fevers, men with aching bones, mothers carrying sick children wrapped in quilts. She greeted each one with patience and dignity, always with a pot of tea steeped in lemon balm or chamomile. She was strict but tender, her long dark hair always tied in a bun, her eyes deep brown and searching, as though she could see the secrets you carried. She loved me fiercely, calling me Mi Estrella, her star. My father, Samuel, was not cruel but restless. He worked in orchards, leaving for long stretches, returning only to stir arguments that filled the house at night. When I was 4, on a rainy January afternoon, he tied his few belongings in a bundle and told my mother, "You and Marisol will be better off without me." He kissed my forehead once, then walked away. For days, my mother cried, but when she rose again, she braided my hair and said, "It's just us now, Marisol. We'll manage." And we did. Those early years were simple and full of innocent joy. In the mornings, I went to the town school, where Mrs. Lewis taught us beneath the shade of an oak when the classroom grew too warm. In the afternoons, I helped my mother grind herbs or wandered with my friends Rosa and Clara, daughters of fishermen. We played with corn-husk dolls, splashed in the shallows, or traded small chores for bites of chocolate fudge from the general store. I never knew we were poor. I had a mother's love, food on the table, and the freedom of the river and forest. That was all a child could want. But when I was 9, a storm knocked on our door, wrapped not in rain but in flesh. It was my grandfather, Daniel Reyes. I had seen him only twice before, always from a distance. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a gaze that sent shivers crawling down my back. That day he arrived soaked, carrying a bundle of clothes and a face carved of stone. "Elena," he said flatly, "I need a place to stay." I watched my mother stiffen at the threshold. For a moment, she seemed ready to close the door. But after a long silence, she stepped aside. Later, she whispered to me, "He's my father, Marisol. We don't turn our backs on blood." She didn't know it then, but by opening that door, she had also opened the gates of hell. At first, my grandfather played the part of a helpful guest. He fixed loose boards, split firewood, and fished from the river. But it didn't take long before the shadows grew. I noticed the way he looked at my mother, always with a simmering anger. When he thought no one was watching, he spoiled her herbs, tossing them into the fire or scattering them in the yard, later blaming the mice. At night, I heard him muttering to himself, curses tumbling from his mouth in half-sentences. My mother began to change. Her songs stopped. Her shoulders drooped. Sometimes I caught her crying behind the house, wiping tears away quickly when she saw me. "It's nothing, Estrella. I'm just tired." But I knew it was more. The town began to whisper. An old healer, Mrs. Alvarez, once clutched my mother's wrist after a cleansing and murmured, "Be careful of that man in your home. He carries a dark shadow." My mother pulled away, her jaw tight, and hurried me along. The outbursts began small, grumbling insults. Then came broken dishes, smashed chairs. My mother would send me to Rosa's house when she saw the signs. "Your grandfather isn't evil, Marisol. He's just sick," she explained. But her eyes betrayed her fear. One afternoon, I came home from school and found my mother with a blackened eye. She claimed she had struck the door frame. That night, I heard his voice, sharp and cruel. "You're useless, Elena. Just like your mother." From then on, our home was not a home, but a battlefield of silences and sudden eruptions. My childhood joy shrank into a constant knot of fear. The eve of my 12th birthday should have been a day of joy. My mother, for the first time in months, hummed while she worked. She was making my favorite, cornbread with nuts. I sat cross-legged on the kitchen rug, shelling the nuts and asking about the harvest festival. "If God allows, Estrella," she said. "I already spoke to Mrs. Martinez about sewing you a dress for the dance." The door slammed open. My grandfather staggered in, reeking of whiskey. His eyes went straight to the bread. "What is this waste?" he growled. "It's for Marisol's birthday tomorrow," my mother answered, her voice steady. His laugh was dry, chilling. "Another mouth to feed. She'll be nothing, just like you." My mother's face tightened. She turned to me with forced calm. "Marisol, run to Rosa's house and fetch the mint I asked for." I knew it was her way of telling me to leave before he exploded. But instead of running far, I crouched under the window. "You don't talk about my daughter like that," my mother snapped. "She's a burden. And you living in fantasies, just like your mother." A sharp crack followed, like a slap. Then his voice, cold. "Next time it won't be just a slap. And that girl, she needs to learn her place." I ran to the river, tears blinding me. Hours later, I returned to find my mother's cheek red, her smile trembling. "Everything's fine," she lied. That night, she came to my rug, sat beside me, and whispered, "Promise me, Marisol. If anything ever happens to me, promise you'll be strong. You'll find my cousin Carmen in Cleveland. She'll help you." I clutched her hand, my heart pounding. "I promise." It was a promise I didn't fully understand. But part of me already knew. The day my life split into before and after started like any other. It was late May, the river swollen from spring storms, its brown waters lapping dangerously close to the stilts beneath our little house. The air was heavy with the smell of wet earth and thunder brewing in the clouds. School had ended early. My teacher, Mrs. Lewis, was ill. I skipped stones on the path as I walked home, half dreaming about the harvest festival, half dreading what mood my grandfather would be in. I heard the shouting before I even reached the porch. "You think I don't know what you're plotting?" my grandfather's voice bellowed, shaking the thin walls. "Please, Papa, calm down," my mother's voice desperate. "Don't tell me to calm down. I saw you whispering with that old healer after church. You want to send me away, don't you? Lock me up like some animal." I froze at the door, peering through the crack. My mother was cornered against the kitchen wall, her face pale, but her chin lifted. No one wants to lock you away, she said. I only want you to get help. You scare Marisol, and you're destroying yourself. His fists clenched, his chest heaving. That girl, you're turning her against me, just like your mother turned you against me. I wanted to run in, to scream at him to leave her alone. But fear glued my feet to the porch. Then it happened, so fast my mind couldn't process it. He grabbed her by the arm. She shoved back, breaking free. He stumbled, then lunged again, seizing her by the hair. Run, Marisol, she screamed, her eyes locking with mine in the doorway. But I couldn't. I was rooted in horror. He yanked her toward the cellar stairs. In the struggle, her foot slipped. A scream split the air, then the sickening crash of her body tumbling down the wooden steps. Silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. Mom, I cried, finally finding my voice. But my grandfather's hand shot out, gripping my arm so hard I thought the bone might snap. Stay back, he barked. His nails dug into my skin as he shoved me against the wall. He disappeared down the stairs. I stood trembling, my ears filled with the sound of his heavy boots. Then nothing. Minutes, or was it seconds? Later he reappeared, his face pale as chalk. She hit her head. She's not moving, he muttered. I tried to push past him, but he blocked me, his eyes wild. It was an accident. Do you hear me? She slipped. If you say anything else, no one will believe you. They'll say you're lying. They'll say you're crazy. I sobbed, unable to breathe. His hands clamped my shoulders. Do you understand, girl? Terrified, I nodded. That night, in the pounding rain, I saw him digging in the backyard near the old apple tree. My mother's body was wrapped in a rug. He lowered her into the earth as if she were nothing more than garbage. I watched from the shadows, feeling my heart die with each shovelful of dirt. When he was done, he turned to me. If anyone asks, your mother went to visit relatives in Illinois. She decided to stay there. That's the story. And that was the beginning of my hell. The weeks that followed blurred together in grief and terror. At school, Mrs. Lewis asked why my mother no longer came to pick me up. She went to Illinois to visit family, I repeated, the lie catching in my throat. Neighbors grew suspicious. Mrs. Alvarez, the old healer, came one afternoon, her sharp eyes scanning me and the house. Strange, Elena leaves without a word. Without her things. Without her daughter. My grandfather's arm tightened around my shoulders, his grip bruising. Elena was always unpredictable, he said smoothly. She needed space. She'll send for Marisol once she's settled. Mrs. Alvarez's eyes met mine, searching. Is that true, child? I felt his fingers dig into my shoulder. Yes, Senora, I whispered. She'll be back soon. But she never came back. Life under my grandfather became a cage. He pulled me from school, declaring education was useless for a girl. My days were filled with drudgery, washing clothes at the river until my hands cracked, scrubbing floors, cooking meals only to hear him insult them. Useless, he sneered daily. Just like your mother. At night, I cried silently on my rug, whispering to the dirt in the backyard. I haven't forgotten, Mama. I'll keep my promise. Somehow I'll find a way. But the town turned a blind eye. Fear silenced them. Fear makes good people close their doors and pretend they don't hear the screams. I learned that at 12 years old. Nearly a year has passed since my mother's death. I had grown thinner, my hair brittle, my eyes hollow. Childhood had left me. One evening, my grandfather stumbled home, drunker than usual. He tossed a package onto the table. Put this on, he ordered. I unwrapped it to find a dress, Sky blue, far too tight, too grown for a girl of 13. I can't wear this, I whispered. You will. His fist slammed the table. Tomorrow is the harvest festival. We'll go, smile, tell everyone your mother is thriving in Illinois. You'll look the part. Do you understand? I nodded, though inside something shifted. A cold clarity. The next day, I wore the dress like a costume, plastering a smile while neighbors whispered behind their hands. My grandfather paraded me through the square like a prize calf. His hand heavy on my back, he leaned down and hissed in my ear. Mr. Carter from the store has asked about you. He has land. Tomorrow we'll talk. You'll be his wife soon. I was 13. He was over 50. My blood ran cold. That night, lying on my rug, I realized something important. It was no longer about survival from day to day. It was about ending this. About taking back the dignity stolen from my mother and me. I remembered the little cloth bag my mother had hidden beneath the floorboard, the money, the address in Cleveland. And I remembered the tea she'd taught me to brew. Calming herbs in one measure, but in another, strong enough to cloud a man's mind, to weaken his body. Justice would not be handed to me. I would have to take it. The plan took shape in silence. I gathered the herbs, hiding them in the rafters where he would never look. One evening, I prepared his supper with care, sprinkling the crushed leaves into his stew. He slurped greedily, none the wiser. Within minutes, his speech slurred, his body sagged. What did you do?" he croaked. "Just a new seasoning, Grandpa," I answered softly. He staggered to his recliner and collapsed in a heavy, drugged sleep. I waited until the house was still. Then I slipped outside with the shovel. The moon lit the yard as I dug at the base of the apple tree, blistering my hands, tears mixing with dirt. At last, I unearthed the rug-wrapped form of my mother. With trembling arms, I dragged her inside and placed her gently on the sofa, arranging the fabric around her as though she were only asleep. "No more hiding, Mama," I whispered. "He'll face you now." When dawn broke, my grandfather stirred. He stumbled into the living room and froze. His face was drained of color. What have you done?" I stood tall, though my knees shook. "You buried her like trash. She was my mother. Now you face her." His eyes flared with fury. "You wicked girl. You'll put her back where she belongs." "She belongs here," I shouted. "And you killed her. You admitted it." His roar shook the walls as he lunged at me. I grabbed the shovel, my palms raw against the splintered wood. His bulk bore down, his face twisted with rage. My mother's voice echoed in my mind. "Be strong, Marisol." I swung. The metal struck his temple with a sickening crack. He staggered, clutching his head, eyes blazing with hate. He lunged again but stumbled, tripping on the top step of the cellar stairs. For a moment, time slowed. His body teetered at the edge, the same place my mother had fallen. Then he plunged into the darkness. The crash at the bottom was final. I stood trembling, shovel in hand. There was no triumph, no relief, only silence. A silence heavier than all the screams before it. That afternoon, I reburied my mother with flowers, whispering prayers I barely remembered. Then I dragged my grandfather's body to the same pit he had dug a year before. I felt no sorrow, only emptiness. By evening, I had packed a bundle. The money, the address, the wooden comb that had been my mother's. I closed the door to that cursed house and walked away. I never looked back. The bus station was crowded, the air thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of oil. I bought a ticket by shaking hands, telling anyone who asked that I was traveling to Illinois to join my mother. But when the bus stopped in Cleveland, I stepped off. I clutched the slip of paper with my mother's cousin's name, Carmen Delgado, Oak Street, near the market. It took hours of wandering before I found the little blue house, with ferns hanging on the porch. My heart pounded as I knocked. A middle-aged woman with familiar brown eyes opened the door. "Yes. Are you Carmen Delgado?" She nodded. "I'm Marisol, Elena's daughter." Her face transformed shock, then tears. She pulled me inside, holding me as I broke down for the first time since Albany. "You're safe now, child," she whispered. Life began again in Cleveland. Carmen enrolled me in school, forged new papers through a friend. I became Marisol Delgado, her niece. At first, I woke up screaming from nightmares, hearing again the crash of the stairs. Carmen soothed me, repeating, "The past can't reach you here." Slowly, I grew. I excelled in school, especially literature. I met Thomas Rivera, a kind boy who worked at the fish market. We walked by the river, shyly holding hands. Years passed. I married Thomas at 20, a simple ceremony with Carmen by my side. We built a wooden house of our own, filled with laughter. We had 3 children, Daniel, Sophia, and Mateo. I sewed quilts, each knot tying up pieces of my past. Thomas prospered at the market. We grew old together. Carmen passed at 86, leaving me with her blessing. "Elena lives in you, Marisol. In your strength, in your children." Today, at 73, I sit on my porch overlooking the Cuyahoga River. My husband is gone. Thomas passed peacefully in his sleep 5 years ago, but my children and grandchildren surround me. I crochet. I teach them the herbs my mother taught me. I tell them stories of festivals and cardinals by the river. The darker tales remain mine alone. I've learned something in all these years. Revenge gave me freedom, but it did not give me peace. Peace came later, through forgiveness of myself, most of all. My story is not defined by what was done to me, but by how I chose to live after. To you listening now, if you are in darkness, know there is always a tomorrow. There is always a bus that can carry you away from the storm. If my story touched you, please share it. Leave the word rebirth in the comments so I know you heard me through to the end. From a 73-year-old woman who walked through fire and built her own heaven, I thank you. May you always carry hope in your heart. You know, my love, for most of my life, I carried this story like a stone pressed against my chest. I never spoke of it, not because the memories faded, but because they cut too deep, like glass beneath the skin. Silence became my armor. But silence can also become a prison. And tonight, I decided to place the key into the lock, to open the door and let the air in. I am telling you now, not to relive the pain, but to release it, like ashes carried by the wind into the river that never stops flowing. I speak because I want you to know that survival is not a straight path. It is a crooked road, filled with broken branches and thorny turns. Yet every step you take away from the darkness is still a step toward the dawn. We survivors are not defined by what was done to us. We are defined by the lives we choose to build afterward, by the gardens we plant, by the love we dare to give when once we were shown only cruelty. My children and grandchildren, they are my testimony. They are the living proof that light can grow in soil once poisoned by shadows. If you, listening now, carry your own secret storms, I want you to remember. The night never lasts forever. Even the smallest flame can push back the darkness. Your story does not end in pain. It can be rewritten in strength, in healing, in quiet joys you don't yet know are waiting for you. So, if my voice has reached your heart, help me place this candle in the windows of the world. Share this video. Leave me a word in the comments, perhaps rebirth, so I know you walked with me to the end. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Not for me, but for the next story, the next voice that deserves to be heard. As for me, I have carried many names in my life: Marisol the frightened child, Marisol the orphan, Marisol the survivor. But today, I leave you as Marisol the grandmother, the woman who chose love over hatred, creation over destruction, life over silence. This is my farewell, my closing of the circle. May it be not an ending, but a seed. A reminder that even in the ashes, something new can take root. Because rebirth, my dears, is always possible. Always.